Brandon, welcome to the pod, man.
Mate, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Man, it's been fun getting to know you, the Mankind Project, everything that you guys are up to. Love what you're doing. And there's a lot of different things that I could talk to you about. I want to lead with a little bit of a heavier subject, but one that's very close to my heart, and that is the subject of men's mental health. Obviously, what we talk about pornography addiction is in the scope of men's mental health as well. But I think more depression, anxiety. I've lost three friends to suicide in high school. And as I was getting ready for this interview, I found out that you also lost some loved ones to suicide. Can you just talk a little bit about your own experiences, and then I want to hear some commentary afterwards.
Yeah, no, Sathiya, great to be here, mate. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, let's jump straight into to suicide. This is a it's a meaty subject, but I think we can look at it from an outside lens, and we can obviously share our own anecdotes and experiences, and hopefully just remind people that who hasn't at some point, at some low in their life, thought, what if I just?
Hmm.
What would they think if? Would they care if I was not here? Or whatever, like some form of ideation. I'm sure there's people who haven't, and kudos to you, but most people I've spoken to in life have mentioned some form of a valley in their life where they didn't see options. So, yeah, man, let's dig into it. I'll tell you my personal story. So, in 2015, I found out, well, basically, I was dating a girl. We were pretty serious. Her ex partner messaged me, and was basically like, I'm hooking up with her again. I at the time was pretty stressed. I was dieting for a like fitness modeling at the time, so I was like 6% body fat, which no happiness occurs below 10% body fat. I'm telling you this right
Yeah,
now.
once you hit
Don't
single
do it.
digits, it's all
It's
downhill,
not
right?
worth it. Not worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like in the middle of finals, for college, and just had a lot going on. And to be fair, we were not in the best place. So I actually, in fact, had a panic attack when that got that information. And I had never had a panic attack before. But being the wise individual I was, who couldn't see many options at the time, I left. I got in my car and I took off. So I'm hyperventilating. Street lights are going past me a million miles an hour, and I just
Mm.
didn't know how to turn it off. I couldn't stop it. I didn't have the tools yet. I hadn't been sitting in circles to be able to separate the flood of emotions and the stimuli from from the actual experience. And so, in that moment, I just saw a tree, and I'm like, "Bingo, that's what I got to do." And I just put my foot down and floored it. And just before I got to the tree, I pumped the brakes. Something kind of came into me that was kind of like, "Nah, dude, come on." I, no, this is not the way to handle this. So fortunately, some rationale kicked in, but it was in that moment of just sitting there, just kind of like my heart rate's coming down. I need to move my car before the police see that I've like totally torn up a bunch of grass as I've like jumped over the curb. I get a text from a mate of mine who I knew of this men's group. I hadn't been to it myself, but a mate of mine was having a hard time. And out of the blue, I got a text from him, and he's just like, "Oi, how come you've gotten me involved in all this men's work stuff, but you don't come to these meetings?" Well, the answer to that was because I judged him and where he was at in life and thought, "Oh, you're broken. You need this. Like, men's groups are for broken men." That was my belief at the time. That was in my own arrogance, right? Oh, I don't have any problems. I don't have any issues. I just, tablespoon of cement and hard enough. That's what I need. Um, but obviously, my dam had broken, and he had texted me at a divine time. And that was a Monday night. The circle meets on Tuesdays. And so I went to the men's group. And I didn't miss one for like 8 months. Every week I showed up. I did the new warrior training adventure, which is so this group was a part of the Mankind Project, which I'm still with today. And I operate a group here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I host the podcast for the organization, the Mankind Podcast. So this is, 9 years down the line now, where
Wow.
I've been deeply committed to this work because of the impact it's had on my life in throughout relationships, throughout highs, throughout lows. It's been deeply, uh, excuse me, it's been a huge part of my life. And so, yeah, that's kind of my journey of how I got into men's work. It was through attempting to take my life, but I certainly wasn't. I wasn't planning it. It wasn't something I'd been thinking about for a long time. It wasn't something I'd been ideating over. So, in my case, and it's an example of like a moment, a
Yeah.
lack of judgment, a lack of clarity, overwhelm of emotions, and then yeah, trying to commit the act. Whereas in my groups, in my friend groups, I've known of men that have been planning it for like 10 years,
Yeah.
trying to get their ducks in a row, make sure the kids are taken care of so they can finally do it. One guy was planning to, his wife had cheated on him with his best mate. He's like, well, I'm going to take them both out and myself. Like,
Wow.
and obviously confidentiality is important. No one will ever know who he is. And he's a fully functioning member of society because of the work he's been able to do around it. So yeah, it's been a pretty frequent conversation topic in some of our men's groups and in the podcast, certainly. And I think the more we can talk about it, the more options we can create for those who are finding themselves in that place
Yeah.
to be able to help them see, like, there's nothing wrong with you or you're broken if you found yourself in this contemplative space of wanting to hurt yourself or wanting to take your life. I believe these are human experiences. However, oftentimes it's because there's a lack of resources in your life,
Mm.
not just financially, but connection wise, other forms of advice, other paths to do healing through mental health. So yeah, that kind of gives you the context of how I've found myself in the space. I'm certainly not here to take down nooses. Like, that's not my mission. That is a byproduct of what we do in the Mankind Project. I mean, we have a lot of men come to us who want to go from good to great. It's not just about I'm struggling with this thing, but it's because we welcome men from a whole range of experiences wherever they find themselves. And even though I feel like life has never been better, financially, emotionally, relationally, through my parenthood, like, there has never been a better time of life for me right now. I still sit in circle most weeks of the month because it keeps me there.
Yeah.
It keeps me in this place. So
Yeah, it's beautifully explained, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. Like, even you talk about you work with people who are going from good to great, and sometimes it's the people in those places that are actually the most susceptible to suicidality because on the outside their lives look like they're all together, things are going relatively well for them, but then there's a lot of pressure behind closed doors. Maybe they're still working through some of those faulty beliefs or why am I here? What makes me valuable? All that kind of stuff. And that's I think why your work is so important. If we were to broaden this conversation a little bit, Brandon, because I know you guys run a lot of events. You're literally just in the scope of like serving men, helping men improve the quality of their lives. What would you say from a mental health standpoint? What are some of the biggest challenges that men do face? I think suicidality is definitely on the rise. I can't imagine it's maybe the most common one, but what are some of the mental health issues that a lot of guys seem to be confronted with?
yeah, so the my answer to that is there are certain people in this space that may give you a similar answer or a different answer. I can only speak to my experience and what I've witnessed and the little bit of research I've been a part of through the organization. I mean, Stanford did a humongous research project with the Mankind Project, which is published and out there, which is really insightful. I kind of put it down to three things. Forgive me if I forget one of them, but I was on a podcast recently talking about these. Kid didn't sleep last night. I'm sure you know all about that, you and your partner.
Very
Um,
acquainted, yes.
One is meaning. When there's an absence of meaning in life, it's so interesting that since my daughter has been born, my wife and I have less time to achieve, to do X, Y, Z, the things we could do previously before becoming parents. Yet we can achieve more in a finite amount of time that we ever could in an entire day
Hmm.
because there is a lot more meaning to our actions,
Yeah.
right? Everything is a trade off. Do we want to go mountain biking? Okay, well, then we have to get a babysitter, right? So there's a financial trade off. Do we want to go mountain biking this weekend? Oh, but Christine's had a big work week. Does that cut into quality time with her? Like, so many decisions have these adjacent factors that come into play that we're far more attuned to than before we were parents.
Hmm.
So that's just one example of meaning. I can tell you before becoming a parent, it was kind of hard to get up and go sometimes and like do the things I needed to do. But
Yeah.
when her nap could be 2 hours, it could be 15 minutes, it's like, I'm going to see what can be done in that time because that's the only time in which I can get XYZ done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a basic example. So meaning, I think impact as well. I believe men have an innate desire, and I don't want to broad stroke all men because a part of our show, the Mankind Podcast, has proven that there's more than just one way to be a man,
Yeah.
right? We're trying to get out of those rigid definitions of what it means to be a bloke. So, but if I can generalize, I would say that men want to have impact. They want to know that their actions, their behaviors has a knock-on effect positively to others.
Hmm.
And a lot of men have challenges seeing their worth because they base their worth on their output. They base their worth on what's in the bank account, how many hours they work, what they can provide for their families, which that is not, I judge, to be where inherent worth comes from. So we've got meaning, we've got impact, and the final thing I'd say is connection. We, as men, have a lot to learn from the women in our lives, a lot to learn. Because I was raised that if you have a challenge, if you have a problem, you put yourself in this position, you get yourself out of it. Do not ask for help. Because if you ask for help, let me make it a nice statement. If I ask for help, what does that mean? I'm weak. I am incapable. And so what I would do is I would take my problem, I'd bring it into my cave, and I would try and solve it as the person who created it. How arrogant of me to think that I have the ability to solve all my problems when I'm inherently the one who's created them and put them in that place. And so through mentorship, through peer support, like being in a men's circle, that's how I've been able to gain outside perspectives and learn that, oh, wow, like I've been swinging the axe this way when really if I tilt the angle this way, or if in fact I actually take some time to sharpen the axe, maybe I can make a cleaner cut. Like these are the things that I was blind to previously, that through connection with others, the path illuminates. And
Yeah.
this seems so simple. Like this really does seem so simple to think like, oh, just have some friends, you know, just make some mates. But what are the barriers for men generally to try and create and harness those relationships? Oh man, if I open up to my friend about this challenge I'm having in my marriage, is he going to judge me? Is he going to tell his wife, and then his wife is going to tell my wife? Or, is there inherent confidentiality in this relationship? Or based on my previous relationships, I've had friends out me for things I've said. I told a mate in high school, yeah, I love you, man. Like, just like, dude, I love you, man. Like, you're a good buddy of mine. He goes and
Yeah.
tells the rest of the school I'm gay.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
and at an all boys Christian private school, yeah,
That's a
that's
problem.
target on your back.
Yeah.
So this is, I believe that we have set ourselves up, or at least society or culture has set up men to really fail in those areas.
Yeah.
Meaning, really trying to get to the core of why do I do what I do? Impact. What impact am I having in the world? Being able to see that even though I work this tax job or whatever, and it feels like kind of like office space, it feels meaningless. It doesn't feel like it's having an impact. Yeah, but what's the purpose behind that? Is it putting food on the table? Is it putting your
Mm.
kid into those extracurricular activities that you know they enjoy and that's going to give them a leg up in life? Like, notice the trickle down effect of the things that are seemingly insignificant that actually have impact.
Yeah.
And then lastly, connection. Where along the lines were we told in our lives that you can't have deep connections with your friends that you can tell all your secrets to? All right, first
Mm.
grade, second grade, young boys are interviewed. I interviewed Niobe Way. She wrote a book called Dr. Niobe Way. She wrote a book called Deep Secrets. It's powerful, and it talks about how we're in a connection crisis, that young boys go from loving, caring, you interview them and they'll tell you that, tell me about your best friend. Oh, I love Sathiya. He's my best friend. I can tell him all my secrets. I can tell him things that I can't even tell my parents. He's always there for me. And then fifth, sixth, seventh grade. Oh, tell me about your relationship with Sathiya. Do you still love him? Oh, no, love? What are you talking? Oh, no, I'm not gay. I'm not whatever, right? Because boys start to begin to get policed and to police each other into turning up and showing up different ways. And isn't it funny that, especially in our organization, most blokes, they're like 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, when they hit that, that existential, bought the Mazda Miata, cheated on their wife or their husband or whatever, then they're coming to us realizing they need these things. And I'm like, dude, it's not about learning how to connect or have impact or meaning. It's about remembering
Yeah. Yeah.
remembering before we forgot, before society told us it wasn't cool, it wasn't safe, it wasn't, man enough to be those ways, to have those sensitivities, to think about impact and meaning and such.
Okay, so impact, meaning, connection. Interesting you talked about meaning because they did a study. This was maybe a couple of years back, but it was a multivariate analysis. So they're basically looking to see, okay, there's all these things that could impact somebody's view of pornography, and we're going to see if any of them, if we modify one of them, does it affect the viewership negatively or positively? And what they found is there was one variable that stood out above the rest to be the greatest determinant of whether or not somebody would watch more pornography. and it was meaninglessness in life. So I think the fact that you've hit on that is significant. And I would make an argument that if a guy can really focus on the connection piece, the third one that you listed, the other two actually become a lot more easy. Maybe they're even natural byproducts. Because when I think about the impact I'm making, it has everything to do with the connections I'm forging with our clients, with our staff. Like there's a very relational component to that. And same with the meaning I'm making in the world. Like professionally, there's definitely a degree of it. And definitely at home, being a new father and my marriage and, those relationships are so critical to having meaning in life. So I like that you hit on that. I want to ask you, because you mentioned you grew up without maybe the guidance that you needed to really be emotionally healthy, to manage things psychologically well. And I really relate with that part of your story. And I shared some of that on when I was being interviewed by you on your podcast. What have you done to become Brandon Clift today? Because the one thing that has actually stood out to me very early on from our discovery call is there's an incredible poise about you that's very well rounded. It's not particularly macho, even though there's strength to it, and it's not overbearing, but it's definitely assertive. And at the same time, I can tell there's a very tender and emotionally attuned side of you. How did you develop that?
Well, I got my black belt in BS from a very young age. No. No, man, yeah, that's a good question. Well, thank you for your reflections. Certainly, I mean, certainly trained, like certainly trained. I think there's certainly a part of me that has always been attuned to reactions. So I was a kid that had very few filters between a thought and then saying it. It's what got me most in trouble as a kid, where I would just, bleh. It's almost like I don't have Tourette's, but it almost came out like that. I could not hold it in my head and analyze and process before I would say something. So I got very attuned to realizing, oh, my words have had impact
Hmm.
on others. Like I would try and make a joke, but hurt someone's feeling. Like, man, as a kid, if I hurt someone's feeling, I tried being a bully in sixth grade. It did not last long because, like, when I made another kid feel lesser than, like, I felt that knife in my stomach.
Hmm.
And so I would probably say, if I could put it down to anything, this is good. It's good you asked this because I don't think about this much. I'd say it's empathy. I believe I have a natural orientation to empathy. I remember I came home from school once crying, first day, new grade, new teacher, new students, and and I said to my mum, she goes, "What's wrong, honey?" And I said, "Mum, I feel everything. Like I feel everything, and I don't know how to turn it off. So like, if someone cries, I cry. If someone laughs, I laugh. If someone gets angry, like I'm right there with them, fuming." And I would say that's probably the thing. Like every strengths finder, Myers Briggs, Enneagram, it always comes back to some form of like empathy being up there, uh, or emotional attunement. So I'd say that's probably the thing that has really helped me in men's work is like when a guy is sharing, and you have to learn with empathy. I think it's very easy to have leaky boundaries
Hmm.
with empathy.
Yes.
I had to navigate at a young age that, especially when Brene Brown stuff came out, I was like, oh, I'm good at sharing all my dirty and dark secrets. And I'm like, okay, am I being vulnerable or am I oversharing?
Right.
Right. So I've had to learn those boundaries and boundaries of others. Like, oh, just because I'll tell you all my dirty, dark secrets doesn't mean I have an inherent right to yours. And so, man, I'd like get to know someone and within 5 minutes be like, so tell me, like, what's your deepest wound from, what is the wound that informs your life view and blah, blah, blah. And I watch this person like start peeling the label on their beer, being like, yo, why are we talking about this right now? So
Yeah.
I'd say it's come from also touching the stove a lot and just
Yeah.
learning from social interactions like, oh, say that, don't say that. Which I think has been a good university of life kind of lesson. And I think most people can. That's the challenge, I think, with us being so hyper connected online
Hmm.
is it doesn't allow for a lot of those opportunities to really mess up and stick your foot in your mouth and say the
Right.
wrong thing or do the wrong thing or whatever because there aren't any social consequences of that.
Hmm. Right.
And so I think that was really good for me too, especially as a young 20 something trying to go out on the town and pick up. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, that did work. And starting to learn the kind of fine balance between persuasion and manipulation and just personality and,
Yeah.
or good intentions, whatever. So yeah,
I
that's
really feel that way too, because I think the first 30 years of my life, I didn't, I mean, granted, you and I both grew up kind of in the technology boom, right? So we had a life pre-tech and post-tech, but even work for me didn't really become that virtual until I was about 30 years old. And I think what you're touching on is a pretty big deal. Like we're talking now, we were having this conversation, my wife and I, the other day, about one of our friends' kids who was born during the pandemic and first couple of formative years during the pandemic, and you can just tell that the social acuity is very different than that of somebody typically their age as a result. Like there's something to be said about that social element. And I wanted to ask you this earlier because you were mentioning how men typically come to you late 30s, early 40s. Maybe things have gone a little bit out of control and now they're trying to get their life back on track. And obviously we know the more proactive and preemptive they are, the better. Like we don't want those reactive situations happening. It's definitely for you, and we feel the same way over here at Deep Clean for guys quitting porn. But I wanted to ask because I think that age group you mentioned is not coincidental because that seems to be a lot of the demographic we're serving as well. And my theory is that at this age group, and I'm experiencing this now as a 34-year-old, it's very difficult to forge meaningful relationships. And it's harder now than ever before in a time when it should be easier than ever before because, like you said, we're hyper connected online. But my wife and I have really found it just like strange socially. Like we kind of like just this is where we're at personally. I know not everyone is here, but we're kind of in this middle ground. We were really plugged into a community, but we kind of have moved and everyone's a little bit far away. So we started to kind of not go and see them as much because we want people more locally, but then you don't just make friends overnight either. And at this stage of life with kids and a business, like you don't have all this time floating around to just build friendships. And I thought I was the only person who's felt this at some point in their 30s. And I'm finding out now this is actually a very common experience. And my theory is that the disconnection starts to kind of fester and compound. And then late 30s, 40s is when you see people acting out and misbehaving a little bit more extremely. I don't know how true that theory is. It's just a theory. But have you guys observed that in the Mankind Project and something about this age group where you need to be a little bit careful and maybe a bit more intentional making those friendships?
Yeah, I don't know so much. I can only speak for me in a way that when I mean our daughter coming around has been the best thing for us socially because
Mm,
we're finding other couples that we can really relate to that are like
yeah.
in it. They can come to us and be like, oh man, kid had a diaper disaster in the middle of a road trip and the car seat had to come out. And we can just be there and be like, yeah, totally get it. Been there. That sucks. It's almost like you have this like peer suffering and enjoyment and thrill that comes from being with other parents.
Yeah.
And I think we have created that. And we believe in manifestation. I believe we manifested these incredible people into our lives because so many of our previous yeses have become nos.
Mm,
And so rather than giving so much energy to this person or that person, like I said this to my wife the other day, she has a friend, a work acquaintance from work. And I was like, if you didn't work together, would you be friends? Would you make the effort and time to hang out? She's like, no, probably not. And I'm like, "Oh, isn't that interesting?" And so it's almost like we began to audit our lives in so many different areas. And I think also becoming a parent, it's so funny. I used to care so much what people thought about me. So uh, debilitating. Like my only source of fuel came from other people's like validation of me. And
yeah.
those who follow Enneagram, I'm a 3. So like center stage, like to be the star.
Let's go.
And
Me
yeah.
too, bro.
Yourself?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
There you
Flaming three
go.
over here. Yeah.
There you go. So uh, I remember when I started going to men's groups, like I was so anxious in it coming to me to be able to check in because I'm like, what could I say that would be so impressive? And which is totally against the point of a men's
Yeah.
group. So anyway, recovering seeker of validation from others. But when my daughter came along, like the amount of F's I give for other things has just been completely narrowed down to like my daughter's opinion and my wife's opinion.
Yeah.
Those are the only. My wife, she can cut me down like you wouldn't believe. I'm like, "Ah," like my belly is always exposed. Like she's the only one who has that access. But anyone else, like I couldn't give a flying, what about what they think.
Yeah.
And so when we've now from that place, the people we've attracted have just been top shelf, like absolutely top shelf. And we've been able to go deep really quick. And we've been able to like, there's not a lot of surface level conversation because we make it very clear. Like the first 7 questions I asked you after meeting you had nothing to do with work or where you went to school. because that's not what we're about. We can talk about work all day. Absolutely. I'm
Right.
more than happy talking about work, but I don't care so much as I want to get to know you. And from establishing establishing that expectation in the beginning, people know that are in our circle. Like I can call Brandon and say, I'm having a trouble with addiction with porn or whatever. And they know that I'm going to be like, tell me more.
Yeah.
I don't judge you for that.
Yeah.
I mean, a mate the other day told me that, he's not proud of how he was in his early 20s and how he took advantage of women. And am I going to try and be the judge and jury of his past self and cut him down? No. I'm like, tell me more about it, man. Like, is that the person you want to be today? Is that the person you are today? No. Well, good on you. Good on you. That's beautiful. Like you're putting in the
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like I think in the 30s, that's something that I found to be the best part of getting into the 30s because my mentor called the 20s the rooting, drinking, and drugging era. And for those from the States, rooting in Australia means sex. And it's basically your time to make mistakes. And he's like, if you don't do that then, you're going to turn 40 and want to do it then
Hmm.
because you didn't get to do it when you were younger. I saw this living in Utah. We worked with a lot of Mormon guys. And I imagine you probably work with a lot of Mormon guys too. Latter
Yeah,
day
we've
Saints.
had our share of LDS come through for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Utah, the U.S. capital of porn addiction and plastic surgery. And
Plastic surgery, I didn't know that. Porn
yep.
addiction, I knew, but yeah.
Yeah. So I mean it was just so incredible to meet these men that have been, I judged kind of externally directed in their lives and how they're supposed to show up and such. And they've had to turn themselves down, really their inherent personalities and who they are. They've had to turn them down and not be able to express themselves, whether they're actually gay or bisexual or whatever, because often excommunication comes as a result
Right.
of being such. To see men like that be able to finally breathe and be themselves, it's often in their 30s that they were coming in. It's
Hmm.
often they were, and it's because they then found themselves wanting to get into porn, infidelity, looking outside of their relationships, attractions outside of their marriages.
Yeah.
So to come back and answer your question, have I seen that? Yes. Now I can recall really seeing that when I was living in Utah, is we had this
Hmm.
huge LDS component to the Mankind Project because I believe we gave them a space where they could finally just, no one's going to tell my stories and my secrets here. It's not going to get back to my bishop and I'm going to get kicked out of the tribe. They could
Yeah.
actually breathe
Yeah.
and be themselves and explore.
There's something to be said, like you were talking about vulnerability earlier, the difference between vulnerability and oversharing. And I find that I think you just hit the nail on the head. Like that's because I've been trying to figure out how do you define healthy vulnerability? Because I've seen, and my audience is probably sick of hearing this, so I won't belabor it, but I've seen vulnerability also used as kind of a reward mechanism, which is sort of the oversharing thing you're talking about, right? Where it's like I'm really just sharing this to get it off my chest. I'm sharing this to for the attention it might get or the validation or whatever. It's not really vulnerability for the sake of yeah,
Guilty.
right,
Guilt.
yeah,
Yeah, I have.
hundred
Yes,
percent.
absolutely. I've done that.
And I guess that's where I think the measuring stick is like what's the reward or what's the consequence of what you're sharing? Because I think the space that you created for those LDS men, which is very powerful for them to be able to confess attractions that they've had or experiences they've had that they know would have major ramifications if they were to come clean in their religious communities. There's a consequence to being authentic, right? Or sharing about an experience that's real to you. You've given a space where there isn't a consequence or the consequence of it is or the reward of it is just acceptance, right? And that getting that connection. And I wanted to this was like I had two questions I wanted to ask you. I already asked you one of them, but this is the other one I wanted to ask you for sure in this conversation, which is what are you guys doing to create this space where guys can feel so comfortable? Like, what is it about your environment, and specifically the in-person events? I'm like especially curious about. Why do guys come there and feel like I can share and I'm not going to be judged?
Well, I'm going to give you as many answers as I can as to what creates a container in which that's possible. One is there isn't an expectation that they do share. They can pass.
Okay,
You can
why is that so
pass.
important?
Because if this is the first time you're sitting in an environment like this, or one of very few times a man is sitting in an environment like this, it could be terrifying. Who knows what skeletons someone has in their closet? And we should never compare experiences, but your experience may seem like, that's a molehill compared to what I've been through. But to you, it is the Everest of challenges.
Yeah.
We've got to respect that. You've got to respect that first and foremost. That's your lived experience. That's your story, your judgment, whatever. And so I want men to know they don't have to share. But what often happens? They start and they cannot stop. They cannot stop because it's like, it feels so good to just open the faucet and let it out. So I think firstly, knowing that men do not have to share, I think is a really important one, is how we create that. Secondly, and I judge to be the most important piece, is confidentiality. Anything said in these spaces stays in these spaces, because I may be sharing something like I sat in a circle back in Utah, and there was a man who was going through a custody battle with his ex-wife, and he made it clear, if this information gets out from this circle, there may very well be a ramification of me losing custody of my children. So this is privileged information. So you bet no one was going to say a thing about what they heard. Has it happened? Yes, it's happened. We have processes to clean that up. But the really, every man has to commit to confidentiality. What I say, hear, speak in this circle stays in this circle. Because if someone leaks my information out, you think I'm going to want to share anymore?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
sometimes the things,
I'm guessing you've never
yeah.
had that, right? Like, have you ever had someone breach that confidentiality?
No, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Hundreds of
Yeah.
circles over the past 9 years. I personally have not seen it.
Yeah.
And I've been close to doing it because,
Yeah. You're
ADHD,
sharing a story
ADHD
or
brain, I'll be
whatever.
like, blah, 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 blah. And I'll be like, whoa, there is a chance if I share this bit of information based on our social circle that they can at least deduce who it is. So
Sure.
I lock it down.
Yeah.
And that
It's
muscle gets stronger over time.
Well, the reason I ask, sorry to cut you off, but the reason I ask is because we've, like confidentiality is a huge piece of what we do as well. And we've worked with some more reputable people with followings online, or they're more public facing athletes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And like I truthfully, I cannot guarantee 100% confidentiality if they're in the community or the group.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that we've just, number one, we've never had a breach of confidentiality ever, never, not even close. But the other thing is everyone has something to lose, right? And it's kind of that cool thing with confidentiality in a group environment. When you have a group of guys who are all committed to a process, like with the Mankind Project, it's like we're trying to be better. We're trying to be better for our loved ones. We're trying to improve our quality of life here. Like we're on mission. And I know that I need to protect your confidentiality. Yes, of course, for your sake, but even for my sake, because if I expose you, I expose myself.
Yeah.
Like it's like there's that cool mutual beneficiality that I think is lost. And I know that exists in our community. I figured it'd be in a community like yours as well, but I just want to ask. Anyways, I know you got a huge list of things that you want to keep
Yeah,
going.
well,
So
and
keep
just
going.
quickly to that, I want to use that. I am a custodian of your confidentiality as well. I love it. That makes it sink a little bit heavier for me to go, like there is a responsibility here for this confidentiality. Yeah, so that's important. I think anyone listening can understand the importance of confidentiality. Another one is sobriety. So we request that any man who sits in our circles abstains from any illicit substances, mind-altering substances, the day of.
Hmm.
So I mean, you have a beer at lunch, you're not going to be drunk in the evening, but our agreement is that you won't. Right. It's almost like setting an intention for the kind of space you want to create in your body and your mind and your spirit to be in circle. Because we could have a guy working the 12 steps and the guy next to him reeks of whiskey. What's that going to do to him? If he's in his 12-step process and the guy next to him is clearly intoxicated, like that can get in the way of his experience. However, it's more than anything is important for psychological safety. So the psychological safety of the container, I know that when I am inebriated, I am capable of physical, verbal things that I wouldn't be in the right mind. And so if I'm in circle drunk or high or whatever, and I'm talking about the time the dorm master tried to pull down my pants or whatever, like I may not be able to lock it down like I
Yeah.
could usually, or at least be responsible in how I share, right? So psychological
That's such a
safety is
big
a
deal. It's
huge.
it's a big deal, and it's interesting because I think you might get people who are like, oh, but if I'm on psychedelics, that actually allows me to access those deeper parts that you're encouraging me to share in the group. But I think there's something very significant about that full state of consciousness for psychological safety. I feel like the two go hand in hand in a group environment, especially.
Me and my buddies will go backpacking, moonlit hike, take some mushrooms, let the good times roll. You think we're there to talk about our dirty business? No, we're having a good time. You will never see me in a circle in an altered state. It's just not going to happen, right? So that's anything from, Delta 8 to pot to medications that you aren't prescribed. Like, God, dude, you get someone in there who's on Adderall, it's just like, shut up. They can't
Yeah.
stop. They can't stop. So like it's we've made those rules clear and paramount from the jump. So any new person before they come to circle, they generally have a phone call and they're reminded. If not, beginning of every circle, we always put our hands up. I commit to confidentiality. The final thing I'll say as to how these vulnerable spaces kind of can be created, can be sustained and maintained, and this is the addictive part to me, is that I witness some of the bravest men on planet Earth go places that I am not yet willing to go. Men that will share things that have been locked in the closet for so long and they're so open about it. And that gives me permission to perhaps do the same.
Hmm.
So I've had guys come to circles where they're like, nah, man, I'm a unicorn. No one has ever had experience what I'm experiencing. No one has ever been through what I'm going through, which I think is natural. Our minds get very myopic in what we're going through, thinking it's, the only lived experience that's ever been, right? But when you get in a space, and I know you see this with your guys, that when you're in a space of others that are in various stages of life, going through various challenges, and you witness them do their work, it almost gives you the gift of going second or third or fourth. And it goes, man, I watch them take the leap. Maybe I'm willing. My toes are at the edge. And you know what? I'm going to take a risk. And when that thing is said, I mean, our circles are in Folsom Prison. They're in San Quentin. I mean, you can imagine the stuff that gets shared. These are men that are doing life that are sitting in our circles. When the thing you say that has been locked up for so long that you're terrified of what other people would think, and that it would just ruin your life if it got out into the public world, and you share this with a bunch of relative strangers and they don't bat an eyelid, or they start nodding their head or snapping their fingers like we do in our circle, which is basically to say what you just said is me.
Oh, cool.
That's what's so powerful. To go, I am not wrong or bad or unworthy for feeling these things, for doing these things, for judging myself these ways. I am in good company here.
Yeah, yeah. You have me so nostalgic now because I'm thinking back to my recovery journey, and a huge part of there was a really special window of time. It was 5 months, 6 months, and I was in sharing a room, or sharing a place rather, with three other roommates, solid guys, and we really got close in those 6 months and had a lot of nights where we were just up late talking about life, sharing about things that we had done that we never really shared with people before. Even not even things, not it wasn't always our deep dark secrets. Sometimes it was just like, did you guys ever think about this growing up? Like, like it's such a weird thought. You guys ever have that thought? And yeah, we didn't. I like the snap the finger thing. That's kind of cool. But it was, you'd get the heads on, or oh, bro, totally, yeah. I remember having that same thought myself, or whatever it was, and just how healing that was to just be able to just reveal those deeper parts of yourself. An inherent risk. There's always that risk, right? That you're going to be judged, or people aren't going to get it, or you're going to feel more ashamed after. But that's also what makes it rewarding when you do have a response of affirmation,
Yeah.
a response of, yeah, I get it. I see you, and I've been there. I felt that before. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really cool that you guys foster that so intentionally, because I think about how healing that's been for me. That's really part of what we're creating with Deep Clean, the communal aspect of our recovery system. But it's cool to know that if somebody comes to a Mankind project or event, again, I forget the language there, forgive me, but it's cool to know they're going to get an environment that's so conducive to them being authentic and experiencing healing as a result.
Yeah. Well, and that's healing for everyone looks different. It does look different. So we can't just think like, oh, this is the only way for someone to do their work or learn what they need. I think if a community is healthy enough, they'll have the ability to adapt. and shift and meet someone where there's at. I think one of the best, we've done processes that are like so deep. I mean, guys being able to like, hold the energy of the deceased dad who was abusive or whatever. And so that guy could say what he needed to say. Like all these like very heavy processes can be established. But we also had a guy once who didn't really have a childhood. It was really kind of messed up. He wasn't allowed to have fun, very abusive. And he shared, he's like, there's no room for fun in my life. I don't know how to have fun. So we went to Dave and Buster's and played laser tag, and shot
Wow.
hoops and just like messed around and were just kids. And here's this guy giggling like full Ron Swanson giggle from Parks and Rec, like just, and it's like that could have possibly been some of the deepest work he's ever done in his life, was just to
Oh
actually
man,
have fun,
that's so good.
And so I love these men because my wife loves these men because I'm not dumping all my BS on her.
True.
Sometimes she's
Yeah.
like,
Sometimes
she's
it's
like,
tough for that.
I'm not carrying this wood, chopping this wood or carrying this water for you. Go to you guys. Um,
Yeah.
and these guys love and care about me enough that they're not going to let me fall into my BS. They're not going to let me fall into my stories or my manipulator or whatever. They're going to call me on it and they're going to hold me to a higher standard than I will myself sometimes. And
So
you
good.
can't beat that. Like to be able to trust other guys that aren't my siblings, that aren't in my family, that some of them I don't even know. I wouldn't even call them mates because they're just in my circle and they've got my back and I've got theirs. And it's that kind of social contract we have, which just makes everything else easier in life.
I love it. What would you say to somebody who gets what you're saying, they understand the concept, but they would still rather do things on their own? They don't see the need, or it sounds too messy and too risky. What would you say to somebody who's maybe battling with some lone wolf syndrome?
Well, if they don't see the need, then don't do it, right? Because sometimes things need to get worse before they get better. So maybe it's not time. Maybe they're not ready.
Hmm.
But what I would say is if you're starting to get those inklings that, man, I guess what? I don't have all the answers. And I'm still in the same place. It's January 2nd, 2025. And damn, I was here January 2nd, 2024. If you're starting to recognize that a lot of the same habits are repeating themselves and you may get that sense of being stuck, do it for you first. Don't do it for your kids. Don't do it for your partner. Do it for you. And if you have others around you telling you you need to do it, don't. Unless it's a green light from yourself. We've had women come to our weekends and basically not even stop the car, and the dude just gets like spat out. And
Right.
they're like, don't come back till you're fixed. I almost guarantee that that person is not going to get what they need
Yeah.
because it wasn't their decision. So that's what I tell anyone. I mean, it's so funny. Like my wife says, I got the podcast, I got the Mankind Project, huge part of my life. I mean, I work in tech. I'm not, this isn't what I do for a living. This is just total passion stuff. And my wife's like, you never talk about men's work when we're out socializing and stuff. And it's like, well, I'm not a recruiter. You can tell I'm passionate at least. I mean, if someone opens the door, we can talk, we can jam all night. But
Yeah.
it's up to the individual if they've touched the stove enough times or they've really identified there's a gap that they need to bridge in order to be the person that they want to be for themselves and their family,
Yeah.
then do it. Take a risk. What's the worst that can happen? You'll be out a thousand
Yeah.
bucks in 48 hours.
Yeah.
You know, the circles are free, but our
Yeah.
weekends have an investment, of course.
Sure.
Um, what's the worst that can happen? Take a risk.
Yeah.
And if it's not for
So
you, don't go again. There's no contract.
yeah, nothing to lose. Yeah, you're not locked in for life.
Nope.
That's a funny example you use because we have wives reach out to us very frequently on Instagram.
Sure.
Can you fix my husband?
Hmm.
Like what do I need to do to get my husband to do your program? It's like, well, there's actually nothing you can do to get him to do anything. But you could send some content over. Like that's what we always say is like
Yeah.
send some stuff his way. See if he responds to it. Like you can throw some feelers out there, but we don't want somebody who's kicking and screaming joining our program. That's no good for us. It's no good for him
No.
either.
No.
And that was the first thing that you said when I asked you what makes these spaces so vulnerable, right? As you mentioned, people have the choice. They don't actually need to share. And it reminded me of somebody we interviewed about a month ago. His name's Steve Shields, and he is a he's actually a licensed psychotherapist in Utah, and he was a sex addict, like sleeping with prostitutes, all that kind of stuff. Has really done work and now trains other therapists who want to help people in this area and has a thriving practice, that kind of deal. And he said, typical 12-step models say the first step to recovery is admitting that you have a problem. But personally, his stance, just in doing his own work and now all the guys that he's been able to serve through his practice, is the first step of recovery is establishing safety. And he used this example, and I'm going somewhere with this, but it feels so poignant to what you shared. He used this example of a kid who came in, 15 years old, riddled with anxiety, and very clearly at the office against his will. He does not want to be there, but his mom
Yeah.
wants him there. And so he just said, "Hey man, can you just give me 30 seconds? I'll explain what it looks like to work with me, and then you can go." So it wasn't like, if after that 30 seconds you want to work with me after that, then we can see. It was just like, I'm just going to explain what it looks like, and then you can go. So he explains really quickly what he does, and he says, "Thanks so much for popping in." And the guy's like, "Oh, really? That's it? Like, you're actually staying true to your word?" He's like, "Yeah, we're not doing a session today. Go home," kind of thing. And he was like, "How much do you want to bet that guy's going to come back to my office the next week? Because I was true to my word and I didn't force him to do anything he didn't want to.
Yeah.
But now he does actually want to be there. Now he actually wants to share." And I think that's, I see that dynamic in the groups that you're talking about. That's really powerful. And you've used this phrase, you used this when you interviewed me as well. I really like it. The power of going second.
Mm.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I kind of feel like the power of going second is what merges these two concepts together. Like, in theory, you can give the person permission, or you give the person permission to not share. But I feel like most of them always end up sharing anyways. That would be a guess. And I'm sure it's firstly because you gave them the choice and you didn't force anything. But I have to imagine the person who's going second, as you talked about, kind of bridges that gap. Let's talk about that, because I think we talk a lot about going first, but not as much about going second.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, that originally came from marketing language. Like, why do we do testimonial videos on our websites? It's because you get people the gift going second. They can see that there's proven success and, like, okay, if they've done it, I can do it. And I think that, yeah, we don't always have to be pioneers. Like, we don't always have to be like the first ones on the Oregon Trail trying to like discover the new world, because it's success leaves clues. Tony Robbins says that. So especially now when like I'm a bit more risk averse than I used to be, because there's more stakes. Being a father, being a husband, having a mortgage, like you can't just throw caution to the wind anymore. And I want to see who's already done it. I want to see where the success lies. I want to follow those, those little uh, tidbits or clues before making those leaps and those decisions. Um, I got into men's work without needing to listen to anyone else. That's what I told myself, because I had enough content within myself that I had to get out. But I think a lot of men who kind of fit perhaps more of the mold of take it on the chin, be a tough guy, solve things with your fists. Men don't need to talk about their problems. It's almost necessary for them to see, like, what's the proof that this is actually going to work, because everything I've tried thus far hasn't. So I need to see it actually in action. And I think that's a big reason. I say this to my men's group a lot, is it's very easy in these spaces to become what we call shadow worshippers. We follow a lot of Jungian principles. Carl Jung are on the shadow, right? The part of myself that I hide, repress, and deny, the part of my subconscious that kind of pulls strings. I didn't get love as a kid. That must mean I'm unlovable. So this unlovable narrative informs all my interactions and decisions and blah, blah, blah. Our mission is to get those shadows up so that we can wear them in front of us and go, no, this is, I'm not going to say this thing because my unworthiness wants to say it. From a place of worthiness, that's how I want to live my life. But often in circles, it's like we come together and we're just like, yeah, everything sucks. Oh, I'm a POS again. Oh, I did that thing again and whatever. And I'm like, man, it's important to go to those dark places, but not get stuck there. Go there, realize how much it sucks. And then it's like, what do we call it? Integrate, activate. Integrate the experience and then activate it into action. We had Connor Beaton on the show. I'm sure you're aware of Connor's.
We've had him on here before.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh my God. Like the dude. To me, he's like the dude in this space. And, he's creating a program for therapists and psychologists and people that work with men on how to actually work with men. And I found it really insightful that he's like, men need tasks, they need orders, they need actions to follow.
Oh
I
man,
might be getting
yes.
slightly tangential here, but this gift to go on second thing is someone's already doing the work. I want what he has, or I want to be where he has. So it almost
Yeah.
creates this kind of like, okay, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Someone's already doing it. Fantastic. I have some
Yeah.
action steps here to take. Because in our spaces, if you've come 2, 3 weeks talking about a conversation you need to have and you haven't had it, we're not going to force you to do it. That's your own decision. But we're going to start turning the heat up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's getting in the way of having that conversation? What's the fear? What's the story? What's so that the conversation happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
I love that what you said. I didn't know Connor was working on that. It's pretty cool because we have a growing list of clients who have spent years. I mean, some of them a decade plus going to see therapists and doing the work, quote unquote, which is going to the therapist. But
hmm
the therapist is not giving them work to do. And it's hey, what do you want to talk about today, or where do you think we should go? And there's no system, there's no actions, and so that's when we often will hear like one session with our coaches, and they're getting more value than what they got in the years they spent on therapy or whatever.
sure,
And it's just because of that it's that simple dynamic. And there's different philosophies and all that. I can appreciate that, but I do think we need action. We like where I have grown the most is when I've had a model, a system, a
yes,
task list, something to follow. And granted, there always has to be room for individual nuances, right? Like it's a balancing act we're doing here: principles and
sure,
systems with individuality, and giving space for that. And that's something we really tried to master over the years. But I just don't think this is enough in men's work. That's why I love that you guys have such an emphasis on meeting in person, being face to face, having the conversations. Like there's action here. They're not sitting online just watching some videos and like checking the box off. Yeah, I watched the video. Like there's a practical element because I
yeah.
think that's where transformation really happens.
Well, and I think that's why I've become such a fan of you and what you're doing, man. I'm really I'm a big supporter of deep
Thanks.
clean and just yourself, dude, because I see you create those spaces, and that's why part of you know we really at the Mankind Project, I think. I don't know if it's just a male thing, and I'm curious of your stats, but like retention's not always the best
Hmm.
because it's like I don't know, maybe it's guys they get the thing, they're like, yeah, I've hit the mountaintop, I've done it, and then just poof, they either fall back into old behaviors or they get what they need and then move on to the next thing, next step in their journey, which to me I think that's a good thing. Like
Yeah.
maybe that's a good thing the retention isn't there because they're getting what they
For us,
need.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
100%.
exactly right, exactly, yeah. So you're not looking for retention,
Yeah.
which is
No.
good. You Google the Mankind Project, I promise you're going to find Reddit articles or whatever, people saying that we're a cult. I think it's natural when you get a large group of people together, that go off into the woods and do transformational experiences. You're going to get that. We've had 80,000 people go through our weekend.
Wow.
80,000 people. And of those 80, some don't get what they want. And of those 80,000, their partners may not witness the change that they want to see. And so they all go to Reddit and be like, blah, 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 they're a cult and they do da da da. So if you're ever looking into the Mankind Project, do your own research. Like I never tell anyone to shy away from looking up said things. Here's what cults do. They tell you how to think. They tell you what to believe. They put you into emotional places and then make you make decisions from those places. And we have a code within the Mankind Project that if anyone displays these behaviors, they're called out immediately.
Hmm.
Immediately.
Yeah.
When you do a new warrior training with the Mankind Project, you are told, do not make any major life decisions in the next 6 months. Don't go home and divorce your wife. Don't stop taking your medications that you're on. Don't stop seeing your therapist. Keep those things in place.
Yeah.
Keep that structure in place. You need that. You learned something this weekend about yourself, right? But it doesn't mean the external world's going to receive that. You have to integrate this over time, which is a big reason our circles exist. But the point I'm getting to here is if anyone tells you what it means to be a man, it's just my opinion here. But if anyone tells you what it means to be a man, run. Because who are they to say? Who are they? Let me follow your life and how you walk it, and let me be the judge of you are the arbiter of manhood, right? In our spaces, it's up to you to determine what that is. What does it mean for you to be a man? And that kind of annoys some guys because they're like, come on, just tell me what I need to do to XYZ to be, a man and whatever. And it's like, no,
Sure.
that's not my place.
Yeah.
Because I know for some men, to be a man and a great father is to be nurturing and caring and kind and supportive. And society might call that feminine. But to him, that's being the best father and husband and man that they are. So what is it for you to be a man? You got to figure that out on your own.
Yeah.
And you got 80,
Man,
90, 100 years to figure that out.
it's so good. I'll back you up, from, I mean, I didn't know that you went to an all boys Christian private school. So, you'll be familiar with the doctrine, but like the whole concept, imago Dei, like we're all made in God's image. To me, it's funny that we would try to reduce what it means to be a man to just about anything when we also simultaneously believe, this is from a Christian standpoint, but we believe that we're made in the image of an infinite God. And like instead of trying to put everyone into this pigeonhole, um, we're actually missing out on the opportunity to know God better. Because when I
Yeah.
see you, Brandon, and your uniqueness, I actually get to see who God is, like a piece of God that nobody else in the world gets to reflect. And I love that stance, of like, yeah, we're not gonna put a lot of parameters around this. We'd rather people realize that who they are is enough, right? That's the message I'm getting from what you're saying is, dude, the way you are is enough. And if I told you that to be a man you have to be XYZ, you're gonna start acting out of this shame thing of like, I'm not enough, something's wrong with me, and I need to be more like something else that would be
Yeah.
inauthentic. It would violate who I've really been made to be.
See, yes, thank you. Thank you. Because, I'm here in the buckle of the Bible Belt. And that's what Tennessee is known
True.
as.
Very true.
And my wife's a Christian. My mother-in-law, she's a very, very strong, devout Christian. And I love their faith. I mean, honestly, my wife, I've never known anyone to be more lockstep with Jesus and what I know and what I've learned to Jesus to be like.
Yeah.
It's because they believe in a redemptive God.
Right.
There's no checks and balances. You don't get to Peter and he's going, oh, well, you like held that kid down and gave him a wedgie in sixth grade. Like you going down, man, you're going down. Like, yep, that's a
Yeah.
mark. No, it's you have an opportunity to take stock. Is the way that I'm showing up, does it serve me? Does it serve my family? Does it serve my God? Is it lining up with the person that I want to be?
Hmm.
And that's all I want to create for men in our men's circles and in our spaces is the opportunity to just pull out the tools and practice.
Yeah.
It's practice. There's no stick in the landing the first time. I love it. Guys go to our weekends and it's like the weight has come off their shoulders. The mission is clear. They can see the peak they want to climb. They understand, how they got to this place and the effed up things that happened to them. And they, they're like, oh, finally, I can logically understand how I've ended up in this place and I want to do things about it. And then it's like, oh, but I have to do more work. I have to keep at it. I thought I'd got it. I thought I got the medal. I thought I got the t-shirt and I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done with this stuff. It's like, nah, dude, buckle up, man. It continues. It
Yeah.
continues because like what previously was a mountain is now a molehill. What took you a month to overcome, like that's a Tuesday afternoon. I can wrap my head around that. But there's always another mountain. There's always another opportunity to climb and to grow. And that's why I love these spaces because it's like I've been in circles where men started dating someone and then they're engaged and then married and now they have kids. Now their kids are starting high school and it's just so cool to be able to witness them in this journey,
Yeah.
overcome and conquer amazing things, and how human it is to see them fall to their knees again when the passing of a parent and it's like, dude, I need this in my life. I need other men to hold me as I navigate things because it's unfair to my wife if I try and put all of that on her, and it's naive of myself if I think I can do it myself.
It's got to be maybe the defining quality because I'm thinking about, we were talking about retention a few minutes ago, right? With our clients and, for you guys with the Mankind Project. And I would say it's probably the defining quality of the people who come back to us 2 years, 5 years later, they're still not watching pornography. And it's because they have just continued to do the things that they no longer need to do. They're not doing it out of this desperation. My life is in shambles. I need to get it back on track.
Mm.
But now it's, I do this so that my life is not back in shambles and so that I don't fall off track. They just,
Mm.
you do the things even when you don't need to do them. And granted, there are some things that maybe you will only do for a concentrated period of time.
Yeah.
But I think that's where there is an argument to be made, even in our space, for retention, quote unquote, which is, yes, you help somebody make those steps and have a transformational experience, but then there's a continuation of that where you continue to do the things that you no longer need to do, but they're still the right things to do because they keep you in that baseline, they keep you in that healthy place, and they act as sort of a stabilizer for those harder times that are inevitably going to come. And I think that's where there's a good argument to be made for people on your side, who are in the Mankind Project, to really stay there long term, which I imagine is a battle. But I would think the guys who do stay longer term, number one, that transformation goes a lot deeper. But number two, it just means that the ebbs and flows, instead of being like this, they're kind of like this, right? They have like that
Yeah.
cushion that really keeps them in perspective either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if I'm unconscious to my behaviors, I can slip back into them.
Yes.
And so when I'm unconsciously falling back into this place, but I'm not really acutely aware of it, and someone else in my circle shares how they're doing it, I'm like, ooh, I needed to see it outside of myself
Hmm.
to really witness within myself how that's showing up as well. So
Yeah.
it's a great opportunity to give, to serve others, to create those spaces. I don't draw my significance from that. So it's not like something I need. It's just a space I enjoy being in. And, it was tough for my parents to, talk about oversharing when I, going back to the beginning of the conversation, attempted to take my life. I like made it my mission. I put on the cape. I was like going to be the hero to take down all the nooses in Australia, and I was speaking at schools and all the rest. And these articles came out in the newspaper where I was interviewed talking about mental health, and like there was no warm up to them. It was like straight into the nitty gritty of like depression, anxiety, whatever. And it became such a performance that it became my identity. And it's like eventually you want to stop talking about suicide because it's heavy, right?
Yeah.
And personally for myself, it got boring because I'm 24 at the time. I want to change the channel.
Yeah.
And so that was so much of my identity, and not realizing that my parents were having to kind of bear the weight of like their sons being out there talking about this stuff. What does it mean for them? And so when I was living in Utah and broke up with a girlfriend before I moved here, it was a pretty bad breakup. My parents went into like, yeah, are you okay, man? Like, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like in the pits of it, I wanted to, I wanted to vomit. When you have your heart broken, oh, it hurts. Your stomach's twisting. And mum checked in and she's like, honey, are you okay? And really the question beneath the question is, she's like, are you going to like try and take your life again? And
Right.
immediately I was like, mum, I'm not going anywhere. I'm
Hmm.
like, this sucks. This really sucks. But no, I got so much to live for. I just got to navigate this. And the difference between those two experiences was, in the first instance, trying to wrap my car around a tree, I was tackling life alone. And the
Hmm.
second instance, I had a community of men around me that were
That's
holding
it.
me through that
Yeah.
process.
That's it. 100. That doesn't even surprise me a little bit.
Mm.
To me, that just makes perfect sense. So
Mhm.
I want to ask you. 80,000 men have gone through the Mankind Project. You've done research with Stanford. You guys are one of the longest standing men's targeted organizations that certainly I've come across in the years that I've been doing men's work. What are you guys thinking about for the future? Obviously technology continues to advance and guys continue to have the same problems, but
Mm.
they sort of wear different clothes, right? With AI and just the different world that maybe we live in now compared to 10, 15 years, 20 years ago, earlier days for the Mankind Project. I guess I'm just curious from your guys' perspective, what are some of the things that you're gearing up for looking ahead? Is it kind of, we got the same thing that helped 80,000 guys? We don't really need to change anything. Or are there, I don't know, is there anything that you're anticipating down the line that you guys are gearing up for?
Great question. So I'd be naive to think that our current formula is bulletproof, but it still works. And so I think for us, our biggest challenge really as an organization is communication. How do we reach? Because most of our demographic is aging out. Like if you
Hmm.
look at our demography as an organization, we've been the organization for middle-aged white guys,
Okay.
you know, middle
Okay.
class, middle-aged white guys. That's kind of been how most our the mass of who we've got coming in. Now, not to say we don't have spaces. We have the Brotherhood of MKP, which is for for black men. We've got GBTQ circles. for men who don't identify as heteronormative. And so we have these other spaces. I think the biggest, well, my mission primarily as far as my relationship with the Mankind Project is getting younger men involved. Because I think one of the greatest gifts in being involved in this work has been the fact that I'm surrounded by blokes who help me avoid life's many icebergs.
Hmm.
Because I have guys in my circle going through divorce. I have guys in my circle going navigating infidelity. I have guys in my circle going through immense abundance. And I'm learning. I'm like a psychology geek, right? I don't read the DSM-5 in my spare time, but I love witnessing men through various stages of life, through ups and downs. And the greatest gift has been the variety of experiences I get to witness.
Hmm.
And that's been the coolest thing. So I would say the organization as a whole, I mean, how are we planning for the future? I think the biggest thing we've got to figure out is how to communicate to younger people.
Hmm.
Because something that really used to frustrate me, but I have a better understanding of it now, is we're doing so much work after the fact. Men are coming to us after the alcoholism, after the porn addiction, or amidst, right? After or amidst the infidelity, the domestic violence, the whatever. And I'm like, that's such a reactive approach.
Hmm.
Whereas how can we be proactive? How can we capture and meet men younger?
Yeah.
Because like, dude, I wouldn't have anything I have today if it wasn't for this work.
Yeah.
Any of it. And I want to pay that forward in a big way to say to men out there, like, this is the cheat code in life. It's the absolute cheat code. It's to surround yourself with other men who are like you and who aren't like you, to show you that there's many other ways to approach life. The good, the bad, the ugly in between. So that's my mission personally, is to get younger men involved in this work. And that doesn't mean teenagers or anything, because I honestly think there's a necessary time where young people need to think that they're invincible and need to go out and just like root, drink, and drug. Go make mistakes, go have fun, enjoy that, like backpacking across Europe or whatever it is, like go do the things.
Mhm.
But somewhere in that mid 20s to coming up into 30s or early 30s, like I think that's the sweet spot to start surrounding yourself with people that, that inspire you, that challenge you, that show you that there are different ways to think, feel, believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Brandon, for people who want to find out more about you, more about the Mankind Project, where should they go?
Absolutely. Well, you can head to the mkpusa.org. mkpusa.org. If you are stateside, we have 750 men's circles worldwide. So both in person and virtual. We're in 30 countries. And if you feel like there is, you're kind of wanting that rite of passage, that experience, that weekend where you can really like do 12 rounds with your psychological Mike Tyson and come out the other side a victor. The New Warrior Training Adventure has been honed over 40 years to help men achieve that. That's where we've had 80,000 men come through. And we are doing those all over the world. So if you head to mkpusa.org, you can see every training, every circle. You just put in your address and it all comes out. So check them out, see if it's for you. If not, I know there are other incredible men's organizations out there. So that's my call to action, is just, find what's out there, see if it works for you. And you can find Brandon Clift on all socials, Instagram, Facebook. Hit me up.
Amazing, man. We'll put links in the show notes. Brandon, appreciate you, man. It's been so fun interviewing and getting to know you a bit more. Thanks for your time today.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the podcast too.